In the first video of this series, we built this craps table, and now we're ready to add a dice to it. So let's do that. We'll add a cube, scale that cube so it looks like an appropriate size for a dice on this table. And right about there should be okay, maybe a little bit big, but that's alright. Look at it from a front view, go over to wireframe, and lower that so that it's resting onto the table. Take it into edit mode and go into edges. We'll use the edges. Now we want to look at our cube to see how to unwrap it. And one way I like to look at this is 2 parallel faces and then 4 adjoining faces or adjacent faces. And on the 2 parallel faces, I'm going to deselect one edge. So I'll deselect the top edge. And then on the faces that run adjacent to those 2, I'll deselect 3 edges. Then I'll go into the Mesh dialog, into Edges, and Mark Seam. Select all, use the U key, and unwrap it. And this will unwrap it into a shape like this. We'll just ignore the background image, it doesn't really matter at all. We'll go into UVs, Scripts, Save UV Face Layout. I'll leave the size at 1024, but that is a bit big. And we'll give that a name. And I'll call it Dice. Check that it's going into the right folder. And save that. Minimize Blender. And have a look at my image editor. In my image editor, I've already created one number set for a dice. And in this number set, we'll be able to create any set of numbers to place onto our dice. So we'll copy this. I'll zoom in. Use my selection tool. I'll copy a square around this. Copy that. And start pasting it onto my dice. So I'll center that first off in one of the squares. Validate that paste, and then select the area of one of those squares. Then copy that and start pasting it into all of the other squares. The squares will be slightly different sizes, but we'll just ignore that, and the offset won't be something that's noticeable. So I'll just paste that into each of the squares, and with it set into all of the squares, I'll then use a paintbrush tool, the color white, and a fairly large brush, and I'll erase all of the edges of that cube away. So I'll erase and make a 6 on one side. On the opposite side, I'll make a 1. Then I'll make a 5 onto this side. The opposite side, I'll make a 2. And on this side, I'll make a 4. And on its opposite, a 3. Opposing sides of a dice always add up to 7, so that makes it easy to do. So we'll save that as a bitmap image, and I'll alter the name to just dice, and save that. Then I'll invert that, so I'll make it a negative, and save that, this time as a bump map. So I'll add the word bump, and save that. Close down my photo editor, so I'm done with that, and load the UV image up into the UV editor. So we'll go over to the dice bitmap, open that up, and that'll set the dice image into the cube. Come into the materials dialog, in the materials button, add a new material, set it to map from the text face. I'll leave the shaders alone, but add some ray mirror to it. I'll increase that a little bit of Fresnel, and decrease the gloss a bit, because dice are only so glossy. Then I'll add a texture. The texture I'll call bump, for bump map. The map input will be from UV. Map 2 will turn off color and turn on normal. Reduce the color setting to 0 and increase the normal setting. Then go into the textures button and add image for the bump texture. We'll load an image, and we'll load the bump map image that we created, the negative of the dice image. We'll select that. Have a look in textured mode, and we now have a dice. So we can go back into the edit buttons and add a modifier. We'll add a subsurf modifier. Levels 4, render levels 4. That'll turn our cube into a sphere. So we'll press Shift E to crease that, and use the control key and snap to particular location. I'll use a crease level of 0.7 just to round off the edges a bit, and then set that to smooth. Tab into object mode and look at that from a top view. I'll Shift D, duplicate that dice, and pull it off to the side a little bit. Perhaps rotate it also. Change my pivot back to median point and look at it from a side front view. And rotate that dice around by 180 degrees. Quickly set up the camera again. Zoom in onto that. And a little bit closer. And while we have our camera selected, go into the Materials button, into the World buttons, Ambient Occlusion, and turn on the Ambient Occlusion setting. Now I'll do a render. It's going to take a while because of the Ambient Occlusion setting, so I'll cut out of my video and come back with the render completed and show the results of this quick little project. And there it is, our dice sitting on our craps table. And it looks pretty good. We got a nice reflection going from the letters. Nice bit of shininess to the dice. Although it looks as though my bump map was a little bit hit and miss with the erasing of those dots. And a little bit more careful in the photo editor would have went a long ways on this project. So, that's it for this video. And until the next video, happy modeling.